Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth session in American English Live Series 17. We're so excited that each of you can be here with us today. My name is Kate, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, Heather, who will be the moderator, helping answer your questions and responding to today's comments. Let's begin with these wonderful audience comments from our most recent webinar, Plurilingualism and Translanguaging Strategies for Language Teachers and Students with Chris Hastings. So first we had Anugba in Cote d'Ivoire who wrote, "This session helped me understand that learning or teaching English can help people recognize the value of local languages around the world and also promote intercultural competencies." Wonderful comment, thank you. And we have Sophia in Mexico who wrote, "I loved this session. As an English teacher, using L1 during class can be considered inappropriate, but I believe it sometimes makes students' learning a lot easier. The session gave me motivation to continue learning about translanguaging and how to use it in my classes. Thank you so much." Wonderful. And finally, we have Shanila in Pakistan who wrote, "These webinars are communicative, engaging, and practical. I have improved my teaching greatly by following and integrating the activities shared in the webinars. I am grateful for the work you do." Wonderful. So we love to see our teacher participants actively engaged in professional development. So please share your thoughts about our webinars by offering your feedback through the end of session quiz form or by emailing your ideas to americanenglishwebinars@fhi360.org. We may feature one of your comments during the next session. And throughout Series 17, we've been exploring the themes of critical thinking and inclusive practices in ELT. We hope you're able to use the practical ideas we share. And here's what to expect today. The session is about 60 minutes long. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments too. But we really hope to hear from you, our audience, so that we can address your ideas and experiences. Please share your thoughts using the comments feature or chat box. And when our session comes to a close, you'll have an opportunity to receive a digital badge for your participation. At the end of the webinar, we'll share a link in the comments. Click on that link and complete a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly. And once you've successfully passed the quiz, you can expect to get your badge via email within about a week. And before we begin, we want to share the details about one of our current massive open online courses, English for Business and Entrepreneurship. This free self-paced course is for non-native English speakers who want to improve their language skills and knowledge of business and entrepreneurship at the same time. This course can benefit those of you who teach English for specific purposes with a focus on business English too. The MOOC explores how to use market research, create a business plan, and make a pitch to present a business concept. The course is open now through September 25th. Learn more, including how to enroll, by visiting the link shared here on the screen and in the chat by the moderator. And now for today's webinar, starting the year as a culturally responsive language classroom. In this session, participants will gain an understanding of culturally responsive teaching. We'll focus on ways to build a culturally responsive environment from the first day of an academic term or year. Practical strategies and specific activities that teachers can use in the classroom to enhance language learning in a culturally responsive way will be examined. You will also be able to learn from each other by asking questions and sharing your own ideas and experiences. And now we're pleased to introduce our presenter today, Lauren Anderson. Lauren has been a language teacher since 2006, after graduating with a master's in second language acquisition from the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. She has taught Spanish, English, and been an instructional coach at all levels, from primary to adult and higher education. Lauren has served as an English language fellow for the U.S. State Department in Latvia, Belarus, and Qatar. Currently, she is the assistant professor of developmental education at National Louis University in Chicago, Illinois, where she is also working on her EdD in teaching and learning. She lives there with her husband, 3 kids, and a small dog. Lauren loves spending time with her family, being outdoors, reading, and everything language related. Welcome, Lauren. We're happy to have you here today.
Thanks for the introduction, Kate. I'm so excited to be here with everyone. I wanted to share a few pictures of myself so you could get to know me a little more. The picture on the left, you'll see my family that Kate had mentioned earlier. The middle picture was taken last fall at a workshop I hosted in Qatar, where I got to talk to teachers who work with students from all over the world that have had different interruptions in their learning. And the last picture on the right, you'll see me with one of my colleagues from National Louis, and we're at a conference talking about boosting the confidence of multilingual students through language classes. So I wanted to share those pictures to show you that I've been engaging in this discussion about culturally responsive language teaching a lot in this past year, and I'm really excited to be able to continue that with all of you today. I'm going to invite everyone to form our community, to join our community with these norms in mind. So please shape our community here today by sharing your ideas, by being open-minded to the ideas of others, by asking questions, and by being kind to yourself and others as well. So with those norms in place, let's get started. Today, our plan is to discuss what it means to be a culturally responsive language teacher, to share ideas and resources for culturally responsive language teaching, and to have a plan on how we're going to start the year with these strategies in mind. First, let's think about a definition. The definition that we'll use today when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching is really about responding to students' cultural perspectives in the classroom. It can be done by valuing the knowledge and skills students bring to the classroom from their communities. And it also means inviting students into the academic culture with the tools that they need to be successful. So with that definition in mind, let's go further. Here you see the Illinois State Board of Education culturally responsive teaching standards, and these have been the standards that have really guided me in this practice because I work in Illinois. So they're very useful for thinking about concrete ways that you can be culturally responsive in the classroom. The first one you'll see over on the left, the green eye there, is about self-awareness and relationships to others, really being a teacher who can reflect and then connect with students in a meaningful way. Next, we think about students as co-creators, really centering the classroom around the student experience. We also think about students as individuals, really valuing students and the assets that they're bringing to the classroom. Right there, number 4, that purple box talks about student representation in the learning environment, which is about making sure that all students feel seen, heard, and affirmed in the classroom. The next thing we see is family and community collaboration, really working with the community and families to give context to the students' educational experience. They also ask us to think about leveraging student advocacy and giving opportunities for students to be self-advocates. The next one you'll see on there asks teachers to be aware of systems of oppression, aware of the inequities. For example, not all of our students come to our classroom with the same economic resources, and we need to be aware of the challenge that creates and work to use education as an equalizing force. The last standard is content selections in all curricula, and this really means embracing student identity in the classroom and across the curriculum. So before the webinar, there were a few materials sent out, and you'll have lots of resources after. And the Illinois State Board of Education culturally responsive teaching standards are included. We'll get into some of them in more detail today, but I encourage everyone to look at that document to really find out more about these 8 different standards and how you can practice them in the classroom. Before we dive in further with some of those standards, I want to ask all of you, we have this shared understanding of culturally responsive teaching, and what do you think could be some benefits of using this approach?
Yeah, let us know, everybody. What are some benefits that you can think of for culturally responsive teaching? Let us know in the chat or the comments, and I definitely think it can help us to understand our students' interests and ideas better. And that can sort of shape some of our lessons. I think that's one way that culturally responsive teaching can benefit our classrooms. What do you all think? What are some possible benefits of this approach? Let's see. Kahir says it will increase confidence. It reinforces students' culture from Salvador. Students feel seen and heard from Tracy. Lahai says it creates unity in diversity. Edison says mutual understanding. Very nice. Every student will feel seen and heard from Patricia. And it helps to build cultural competence from Mark. Wonderful. Oh, and Ismail says, I believe this approach can help in student engagement in the classroom. Wonderful. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you for sharing all of those answers. And I especially love that phrase, unity in diversity. That really is going to stick in my mind. But everything you all said really agrees with what we're seeing educational researchers say about culturally responsive teaching. As those standards noted, school can reinforce societal inequalities, but we all as teachers are called on to create equity in outcomes for students. In order to do this, in order to help students take things from the classroom and use them to be successful in life, students need to be able to show up as their whole self in the classroom. I know some of you mentioned being seen and heard being really important for students. In doing this, we can help students access all of the assets that they bring to school. And I think in the language classroom, we are always thinking about that, especially in terms of helping students develop their full language repertoire, their full possibility of expression and communication. So that's why in the language classroom, I think this is especially important to consider. Being culturally responsive is something that can help us achieve our language teaching goals. And when I think about this, I refer to the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages and their world readiness standards. They call them the 5 C's of language learning. And that's another resource that is included with this presentation. So you can check that out and see more about what they suggest is the core knowledge that our language learners need to take these skills successfully into the world. So they talk about communication, that students need to have experience with interpersonal, presentational, and interpretive communication. In doing that, they need to communicate with cultural competence by relating products, practices, and perspectives and having that understanding. They can do that by making connections. They need to connect what they're learning in our classroom with different academic disciplines and genres. And they also need to be able to connect with the diverse perspectives they will encounter. We know that to do this, students need to make comparisons. That's how they develop that understanding of the way language and culture works. And all of this needs to happen in the context of community, school community, and the global community to give our students opportunities to use their communication. So I think that thinking about these 5 C's, what students need to be ready with language, we'll see how culturally responsive teaching is really going to help us achieve our language goals. So today we're going to focus on 3 of those standards. First, self-awareness and relationships to others. Next, students as individuals. And finally, students as co-creators, really focusing on how to start off the school year with your students and keep these things in mind to create a culturally responsive classroom. And we'll start first with self-awareness and relationships to others. We know that our perspective is shaped by our cultural background, and each of us is part of many different cultures. Educational researcher Dr. Shiraki Holly has referred to this as rings of culture, which I like to imagine kind of all the rings surrounding me that influence my views and make up my identity. And they can include your class, gender, religion, ethnic background, many more of these different cultural connections that influence your point of view. We also know that each community a student is connected to influences their cultural perspective. And that's why it's so important to learn about our students and the communities that they connect to. We'll start by taking a moment to reflect on ourselves and the cultures we represent, and we'll do that together. Let's share. So first, I'm going to ask you to think about the age culture that you're connected to, but I'm not going to ask you to share the number of your age. I don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable. The point of this sharing is to get people thinking and sharing things that they are comfortable sharing. So I will instead ask you, what is the best thing about being your age? So please share.
Yeah, let us know, everybody. Please finish the sentence. The best thing about being my age is, what do you think, everyone? Let us know a little bit about yourselves. You don't have to give us your actual age, but what do you think is the best thing about your age? Valentina says wisdom. Absolutely. Self-confidence from Maria. The best thing is creativity from Ismael. Pedro says, I'm 80 years old. That's wonderful. Thank you for joining us. Saren says, the best thing is that I get to know people better. Let's see, I have access to technology from Atha. I have independence from Karen, excuse me. Best thing about my age is my experience from Yelena. Ismael says creativity. And Ume says, I'm less judgmental. So wonderful. Those are great responses, everyone. Thanks.
Those are really anxiety. And, you know, I think for many of us, our students, and a lot of you mentioned things like the wisdom that comes through experience and the patience that comes through experience and the confidence that you gain as you get older and more independent. And I think it's always useful for me to remind myself that many of my students are not at that stage yet. They are still not experiencing independence. They don't have all these experiences that have helped open their minds, as you all said. So let's keep thinking about another ring of culture that you might represent. And this time I'm going to not only ask you to think about yourself, but also how you connect to others. I want to ask you, if we visited your country, what would be something we would love? So you can tell us your country too, that helps.
Yeah, please let us know your country as you complete this sentence. If you visit my country, you will love, or if you visit Pakistan, or if you visit the United States, whatever it may be. So what do you think, everybody? I will say for myself, if you visit the United States, you will love our national parks. Let's see here. We have so many great answers coming in. Carolina says you will love the food. Maria says you'll love the hospitality. Bahari says you will love our food and culture. You'll love the nature and beauty from Mahan, the green forest from Valentina, the landscape from Casway. In my country, Ecuador, you'll love the food from Adriana. If you visit the Philippines, you will love the people from Dihan. And let's do one more. Oh, I love this one. Zoila says, if you visit Honduras, you will love the sunset. Very nice. Thanks, everybody.
Those were great answers. It made me want to go everywhere to all these places, and especially with all of you as my guides and experts. And I definitely think it just shows that just by being yourselves, we have all this amazing variety of expertise in the classroom, places that I don't know anything about, and you can teach me. And I think when I analyze my own connection to culture and when I learn about my students, I have two goals in mind. The first is to let students be areas of expertise that may even be outside of my own comfort zone. Because of their age, my students know a lot about video games. So I use this as an area where they might get to be the expert in the classroom. I had a student once that told me all about his favorite animal, an axolotl, and he knew this word in English, and I was certain that it was completely imaginary, that this was an imaginary creature. Well, I learned later that this was a real animal. He had learned about it through a video game, and he had a lot of English vocabulary related to this animal that I didn't know. So this was a great chance for this student to become the expert in the classroom. The second thing I want to do is make sure that students realize how much knowledge we have. Again, that unity in diversity. And one way I do this, I have students like all of you that are connected to many different countries. So I will find out what countries they are from, and we'll start the year playing different quiz games that someone from this country would be able to answer this question. I include it in the quiz, so students really get to show off that everyone here has knowledge and expertise. I think beyond looking at our cultural influences that make up our perspective, it's also really important to reflect on a personal level and what makes up your unique identity. So we're going to do that together with an activity that I use frequently in the classroom. You're going to be brainstorming about yourself, and I'll let Kate give you the directions.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so everybody, we're going to do this. Try using a pencil and paper, or using maybe your phone. You can write on the notes, or if you're at a computer, maybe you can open up a quick Word doc or something like that. We're going to give you 20 seconds. We're going to show a sentence starter, and then you can write down as many words or phrases or anything that you would like to end the sentence with as you can in 20 seconds. And then after that is when you can share in the chat box. So we'll go ahead and pop the sentence starter on the screen here. It is I am. Hope everybody is ready with their pen and paper or their other writing device. And we'll go ahead and begin. Okay, I think time is up.
That goes quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, please share. Tell us one of the things that you wrote about yourself, and you can see my list on there. Although I'll be honest, I think it took me more than 20 seconds to come up with that many.
Sure. So yeah, we already have some great responses coming in. Jose Luis says, I am creative and an artist. Wonderful. Janet says she loves this kind of game. Veronica says, I'm really proud of my country. Lovely. Maria says, I'm a teacher, mother, friend, and trainer. Ahmad says, I am a passionate English teacher. I am the source of inspiration for my students. How wonderful. Edison says, I'm old, intelligent, Ecuadorian, and a soup lover. How nice. I love soup as well. I'm cheerful from Carolina. I'm an English teacher from Amen. Creative, happy. A lot of people saying teacher or parent. And one more from Aksa. I am a Muslim girl. I'm a Pakistani. And I'm in love with food. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing.
I love those answers. Thank you all. And we heard a lot of variety. And I think part of this exercise, I left it very open. It's a very simple sentence starter. And especially the first time I use it, it is meant to make you think, what words come to your mind? You know, we know the power of words as language teachers, and it can really help us reflect on how we see ourselves. What kind of writer are you? Did you prefer short phrases, or maybe you had multiple clauses or longer sentences? Did you focus on adjectives or nouns or prepositional phrases to tell us your location? I heard a lot of emotional descriptions, people saying they're happy, people describing their physical appearance, people saying they're creative, intelligent, mentioning that you are a brother or a friend. You know, all of these are insights into how you see yourself. And it's so interesting to hear and learn more about all of you this way. And I know many of us put, I am a teacher, because here we are in this context where that will probably come to mind in a group of teachers. So thank you all for sharing. And I'll tell you a little bit now about how I use this activity in the classroom to help students in an ongoing reflection process. The activity itself is simple and quick, so we do it repeatedly. I'll have students create a notebook of lists, and then each week we might add a few new words, or maybe even make new lists each week to keep growing this resource of our reflections. Then we can use this for other activities. For example, asking students to find someone who has something in common, or we can make a comparison chart, a T-chart. On one side, we'll take ideas from people's I am lists, and then we'll try to think about who we are as a community, as a group. So as you can see, these notes become useful for all kinds of extended writing activities, and can be a great way to also make connections to things students are learning in other classes, like to literature they're reading, for example, where they're talking about character traits. Also, we are language teachers, so I'm always thinking about ways to help students grow in their expression as they're reflecting on themselves. And you can do that with sentence stems that suggest a particular structure. Maybe you're asking students to focus on adverbs of frequency, or you want them to think about themselves in the future, or you want them to start using multi-clause, more complex sentences, and you can suggest that again through this simple activity that they are used to. You can also use it to draw attention to certain types of vocabulary and help students expand their vocabulary while making that personal connection, or learning more about how different parts of language can work with this I am sentence structure. So we've talked for a moment about self-reflection and awareness of others, and I would love to hear your ideas. What could you do at the beginning of the year to engage your students in self-reflection and self-awareness?
Yeah, let us know, everybody. What could you do, or maybe something you already do at the beginning of the year to engage students in self-reflection and self-awareness? What are some ideas that you have? Let's see, one thing that I think is so important is just to start memorizing everybody's names as quickly as I can, making sure I'm calling everybody by the name they want to be called quickly, so that they feel that I care about them. What are some other things that you do at the beginning of the year to engage students in self-reflection and self-awareness? Let's see, someone has them write an essay. Wonderful. What are some other ideas? Maybe your students can draw a picture if they're not quite ready to write an essay, and write some ideas about themselves. Engage them in an activity like startup sentences from AXA. Very nice. I can ask them to write a goal statement from Patricia. Let's see. Ahmed asks, what is something interesting or unique about you? Very nice. And let's see. I make a cultural quilt. How nice, Edison. That sounds really interesting. And Bahari says, I have them write about their journey, maybe about their what they have done so far in life. Wonderful. There's so many great ideas coming in. Thanks, everyone.
I love all these ideas. I wish we had all kinds of time. I want to know more about everything. And I really like that someone mentioned names, because I think that it often is as simple as starting there, making sure that you know everyone's name and how to pronounce it, and making sure students know each other's names too. It's a great idea. All right, so we've talked about self-awareness and relationships to others. Now let's talk about our students as individuals. I think that knowing students as individuals is really about identifying their assets. And we know from educational research that students come from communities that give them assets that can be used as building blocks for academic skills. And that's our job, right? To create that bridge from outside of school to in school and back again. But there are a lot of assets that students don't always have the opportunity to showcase in the school setting, or maybe they have not had those assets specifically connected to school activities. Some examples of those could be migratory assets, having lived in more than one place, being multilingual, resistance assets, fighting for your beliefs, aspirational assets of having dreams and being someone who works toward goals. Many students have family assets, their family support, and that's where a lot of learning takes place in their life. Many students have navigational assets. They know how to get around places and systems, and that can really transfer into classroom success. Many students have social assets, those supportive friendships that include learning. And we know that many of our students have cultural assets. They're connected to traditions, for example, that inform their perspective and give them skills. So let's work on having more of a definition for these terms with different examples. I'd love to hear about your life. In your professional life, is there something from this list that's really helped you? For example, I have family support. My family is always cheering me on to do my best at my job, and that really helps.
Yeah, great question. And we'd love to hear about this, everyone. What are some of your assets and how have they helped you with your professional goals or as a professional? I would say I did not move around a lot growing up out of the country, but inside the country, I moved a lot. So I have a migratory asset that helped me understand a little bit about how students might feel if they're moving from place to place. So that's one of mine. How about you, everybody? Let's see. Bisma has almost every asset. Wonderful. Great to hear it. And the aspirational and social and family helped you the most. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Ismael says his linguistic capacity. Great. Luis says family support. Dreams and goals. Great. Family, social, and cultural assets from Amir. Let's see. Bahari says I have linguistic assets. And Patricia and many others are talking about their families as wonderful assets, helping to focus on your dreams and goals. Migratory, both in the US and in the world, from Tracy. Umida says family and friend support help a lot. And we're going to go with one more, which is family definitely. I am a mom of 4 and that helps me to teach children, from Carolina. Thanks, everybody.
Those were great answers. And I love that someone said almost every asset, because I think that it's true that many of us have many of these assets, but maybe haven't had that pointed out as an asset in a classroom academic setting before. So I think that's what we're really trying to do when we are identifying students' assets and helping them see their own assets. For example, migratory asset. We know that it's true that moving can mean disconnection and stress, and that is often the focus of that experience. Maybe in the classroom, as Kate said, moving around gave her a lot of empathy for what it's like to be new and helped her see different parts of the country. Those are experiences that can be celebrated and turned into classroom success. I think also about aspirational assets. Many of us have internalized a message that we won't reach our dreams, or maybe that our dreams aren't good enough. I think as educators, we know how dreams and goals work, and we can help students see that our goals help us shape our actions, but it's okay if our goals grow and change as we do. We don't need to get stuck in the idea of success or failure as the only options. And I also think a lot about linguistic assets. I've had students tell me that the way they speak at home is not as good as the way that teachers at school speak. And I think it's really important that we as language teachers help students understand that all forms of language have value. There is no better or worse. There is only different ways that will help us more effectively communicate in different situations. When I'm trying to uncover students' assets and help them think about their assets, these are the questions I'm asking. Not necessarily asking these questions directly to students, but I'm trying to ask questions that get at these things. Which of my students have those experiences adapting to new communities? What do they know about different language situations and the choices that you make to communicate more effectively? What do they care about in terms of what they want to fight for and what their dreams and goals are? Do they have family support? Who can be my leaders in that have that experience navigating places or systems? How can I help students grow in their support of each other? And how can I leverage those assets that students have from engaging in community practices and bring those into our classroom community? My goal is really just to connect those assets to the classroom experience. For example, with linguistic assets, I really want to know how my students communicate, who they communicate with, and in what type of situations. That's my starting point. Now I know where we're at, and then that can help me think about expanding and growing to that next level with this asset. So I'd love now for everyone to share an asset that you see your students using in the classroom, something they've brought from their lives into the classroom that's helping them be successful. And if you could describe how it helps them be successful, that would be great.
Yeah, let us know, what asset do your students have to help them succeed in the classroom? And we have a nice comment here from Umida. Says, thank you, ma'am. These are very informative and clear perspectives. Very engaging. Wonderful. Thank you for that nice comment. What other assets do your students have? Bisma says that their students are aspirational. Wonderful. Miriam says her students communicate with others and share their problems. Very nice. That social asset is definitely so important. What other assets do your students have? Aspirational, great. Let's see here. What else do you think? I would say when I was teaching, my students had a lot of assets in terms of resistance. They had been able to speak up for themselves and to fight for what they needed, which was very inspiring. Ismail says mostly linguistic and cultural assets are notable. Wonderful. Their families support them a lot from Gulton. And Tracy says they are able to share their own culture and compare and contrast their culture with others. That's wonderful. Thanks so much, everybody.
Oh, thank you all. I think a lot about my students now are in their first year at the university, and those navigational assets really show up. Some students are very knowledgeable about how grading systems work or how to work with the different institutions in the university. And for some students, that's a huge challenge, right? So I look for those navigational leaders that can help us figure it all out. And how do I discover these student assets? I think with my students now, I mostly use surveys, right? We have a lot of conversations around assets, and then I ask them questions to try to get at what their assets are. And I think with, maybe younger students or students who are developing English, it might be useful to use visuals, or maybe even use a shared first language for definitions, and then help them translate that into the target language, English. I think it's also really helpful to have as many one-on-one conversations as possible. And I think a few of you have even suggested something similar, that you ask students, what do you want me to know about you? And really keep notes so that you can remember what they tell you and make those connections to the curriculum. Of course, it can be really hard to talk to everyone, so I make sure to do writing activities, maybe fill in the blank, or more open writing activities with prompts that are trying to get at those questions about what students' experiences are and how those can be seen as assets in the classroom. So once you know what assets students have, you can, again, use those as kind of a starting point for your lessons and activities in the classroom. When I find out how my students like to engage with stories, then I can use those same formats in the classroom. And here I'd like to point out, on the American English Resource website for free, they have great resources for teaching with comics. That's really motivating to my students, and because the format is familiar to so many of them, we can really focus in on the language. I also like to find out, why do my students write? They have a lot of social assets when it comes to writing, so then we can use those same formats in the classroom. We can practice, writing like we would for social media, or practice writing like we would in a text message, or using our words to make something more visual and artistic, and not just focusing on communication. When I think about what makes my students feel comfortable speaking, what assets they're bringing, again, they have a lot of social motivation. And here I'll point out another resource on the American English website, actually a variety of resources that deliver lessons through games or songs or chants. These other situations where students feel comfortable, they have knowledge, and we can use that format to go further with our language goals. I also think about student assets when I'm designing evaluation, when I'm designing assessments and tests. For example, if I know my students have that really strong resistance asset, I might have them identify opportunities for improvement in our school and create solutions. For example, posters in English teaching everyone how to recycle. When I know my students have those strong family assets and connections, I might invite them to do translation projects, translate recipes, stories, sayings, other family knowledge, and bring it into the classroom space. Or when I think about my students' cultural assets, I want them to recreate that in our classroom space. So I'll have them create classroom traditions so they can tell me what would be a meaningful way to mark the different milestones and achievements that we reach in learning language. So once my students have spent time focusing on their assets and really expanding that idea of what their useful assets are, I want them to set goals. And that starts with a spark, some kind of inspiration. And I'll share more about that in the following slides. But the spark is meant to encourage students to think about communication goals, to help them connect their life goals with what we're going to do in the classroom. This can be done in a shared or first language or with supportive techniques to stay in English, but I think it is worth doing and finding a way, no matter how you have to do that, given your context. I would suggest visuals or sentence stems or word banks, or maybe even having students tell you their idea and then you transcribe or translate that for emergent writers and speakers. And then when you have these goals, it's important to display them in the classroom, share them with others, or make sure that they are in a portfolio or someplace that they are revisited regularly so they become an active part of the learning process. And this is some example I was thinking about what could be a spark of inspiration in the primary classroom. I often use stories, right? Stories about achieving a goal or overcoming an obstacle. You can find those frequently in folk tales or biographies. I also included 2 pictures from American English Resource website, the Create to Communicate. They had several lessons in there that I thought would be a great visual inspiration for younger students to kind of spark that imaginative thinking about dreams and goals. And this is 2 examples of goals set by primary students. The one on the left says, I want to make video, and then it says YouTube. So as a teacher, this is my opportunity. I know what goal this student has, and I can give them those experiences in the classroom and have them work on making a video in English. On the right, I have a student who we were using that kind of more fill in the blank goal setting format. And he said, I want to write sentences that people who speak other languages can understand. So now my goal is to get that student connected to real audiences so that he can kind of test his own progress toward that.
Those are great ideas. And we have a couple of quick ideas from some participants. Monica says, my students are mostly beginners. So she usually asks them to make a collage and try to write easy sentences with the most common words. That's wonderful. Let's see, you could use short motivational clips of achievements. That's a great idea of a spark from Akib. And Lucine says, I also organize and host different specialists. How interesting. And they share their life experiences. They have an open conversation with my students. Those are great ideas, everyone. Thank you.
I love all of those ideas, the collage, and now I'm thinking, who can I invite into my classroom for goal setting time? Wow, those are great. Thank you. And a couple more. This is also from American English website. If you work with secondary students, on the left, we have the Why English comics. Those were created by students. And again, with secondary students, you might want to get into more of the concrete uses of language learning. I think the interest and goal setting questionnaire, that's a free resource on the AE website, really is great at taking students through that step by step. So those are available for you to use. And these are a few examples of goals that my students set this past year. So that first box on the left, that student really wanted to get better at public speaking. When she shared that goal with everyone else, it made them better audience members for her because they knew that that was her goal. In the middle there, I had a student that said, I want to become very fluent with both English and Spanish as well. And I'm sure some of you went to the last session on translanguaging, right? So now as a teacher, I'm thinking about how to bring those ideas into the classroom as well. So you can see the students have goals, and then my job is to figure out how that can connect to what we have going on in the classroom so they can feel like they're making progress. Okay. So yeah, we heard a couple ideas. I'd love to hear more. How do you have your students either share their goals or just their strengths and interests at the beginning of the year?
Yeah, thank you, everyone. How do you give students chances to share their strengths, goals, or interests? I used to like to have students bring photos in from their family if they had any, and you could even just have them show their photos on their phone. And maybe they can just share a little bit about some of the things they love to do or they feel they're good at. Let's see. I will share some successful stories with my students to enhance their courage and make them confident. Wonderful. What are some other ways that you can share individual strengths, goals, or interests at the beginning of the year? They can create a learning profile. Very nice, from Kim. Surveys from Luis. What do you like? What do you expect? What would you like to do in the class? That's wonderful. What are some other good ideas that you have? They can tell about their hobbies from Mayhawk. They can do group work. Absolutely. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing.
Thank you all. Let's move on to talking about students as co-creators. I think one of the first things we can do at the beginning of the year in the classroom is have students work with us to create community norms. So you can scaffold this by giving students choices of norms or rules that they want to use, basic vocabulary, or again, if possible, using a shared language and then translating. But your goal is to have simple norms, positive language telling us what we should do, not what we should not do. And you don't want too many. You want to be able to focus. I see many schools use, we will be responsible, we will be respectful, and we will be safe. So that meets those criteria. But as you can see, simple doesn't always mean clear, in the sense that what means respectful to one person might mean something else to another. And that leads us to our next step. It's important to get specific with these norms. Have students write down or act out what it will look like when they're following those norms. Another thing you can do is create a visual representation of the norm. For example, that picture. If our norm is, we will come to class ready to learn, this would be a great visual reminder for my students of exactly what ready to learn means. Computer, pen, something to write on. And if you have your phone, turn it down so you're not distracted. That would actually be the perfect photo. We revisit the norms frequently. I'll ask students to pick a focus at the beginning of the lesson, and then we'll reflect on it at the end. And we also use these norms for problem solving. I know that we all said we wanted to come to class ready to learn. I haven't been seeing that happening. What's getting in our way? How can we solve that and get back to our norm? And many of you actually, I think, had seen in 17.3 AE Live with Lindsay Lyons, she focused on establishing classroom norms. So you might have gotten some ideas from there. Otherwise, I really suggest checking out that webinar, because there was lots of ideas for how to do this in the classroom. And that's where you can get some more ideas of what would be a norm that would help students learn in your space. And if people maybe want to share some of those even in the chat as we're going through, what are some norms that help students learn in your classroom?
Let us know, everybody, using rubrics from Mohammed. Let's see. Any other classroom norms that you think would be great? These are some really nice ones here on the slide. We try new things. We help each other. We try to improve society and culture from Miriam. Those are all very, very good. Please keep them coming in the chat. Naib says we respect each other and help each other. Wonderful.
I like that goal of improving society. That is very aspirational. I also think it's important to invite students to be co-creators in the classroom by using their feedback, gathering feedback and taking it without defensiveness to inform your instruction. As a language teacher, I go back to what I know about language acquisition. So that's what I'm usually checking in on with student feedback. Is the input comprehensible? Do they understand most of what I'm saying? But am I also challenging them with some new words and phrases? Am I giving them enough time to think? I also think about the affective filter, that emotional feeling in the classroom. Do students feel positively about themselves as language learners? Do they feel comfortable in the classroom? Do they feel comfortable with each other? And if not, what can I do to adjust to improve the experience? I try to gather feedback during the lesson, for example, thinking about how well did you understand what we just talked about, or do you understand the directions? I train my students from the beginning to show me either fist of 5. 1 would mean, no, not really. 5 is completely, yes, I understand and I could teach others. Same thing, human scale, raise your hands up or down to show your level of agreement. Or online, I really use those online polling tools a lot for this. At the end of the lesson, I have the group reflect on the norms and objectives. And then with those exit tickets that slip students' hand on their way out, sometimes I want them to show me evidence of what they learned that day. And sometimes I just ask them to tell me how they felt about what we learned that day. I also try to do this in a more formal way at the midterm when I still have time to put the suggestions into action through surveys, reflective writing activities, and those one-on-one or small group conversations. Okay, so let's share. How do you use and gather student feedback?
Yeah, let us know, everybody. Give us a few ideas for how you use and gather student feedback. And we had a very nice comment from Nayab. This webinar is one of the most interesting, engaging, and useful ones. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's see here. They can do a map, maybe a mind map. Wonderful.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah, they could do surveys. They could use quiz exercises, asking for their thoughts and suggestions, and using exit tickets from Patricia. And Serena uses Google Forms. Thanks, everybody.
So inviting students to be co-creators is really about being a student-centered classroom, prioritizing their curiosity and interest, continually centering around those agreed upon norms, and giving students that opportunity to set a goal, act on it, and reflect on their progress. And I'll leave you with this question to think about, and you've already given me some of your ideas already, but thinking about as you start the year, planning for those ways that students can be co-creators, co-owners of the classroom space, and co-creators of the knowledge in that space. So we talked about self-awareness and relationships to others, students as individuals, and students as co-creators. And I suggest you check out the rest of the Illinois State Board standards as well, with more ideas for culturally responsive practices that can help you start out the year. Last thing, I'm going to just have you add something new to your I am list. Maybe one more idea of something that you learned today that you could add on. For example, I had on my list already, I am a teacher, but I think I'm going to put even above that, higher priority on the list, I am a learner, because that is definitely how it starts.
That's a great one. Yeah, what do you think, everybody? Add one more I am to your list of those lists that we talked about, and you can go ahead. Oh, Bisma, very nice. I am a changer. Wonderful. And yes, I love yours about being a learner, and our audience are definitely teachers who are learners first. Atha says learner. And Farah says, I am a learner and a teacher. And Akib says, I am a co-creator. Very nice.
Thank you all for sharing your ideas. So we discussed what it meant to be culturally responsive. We shared ideas. There's resources that will come with the end of the presentation as well. And we made those plans, and you guys gave me some new ideas for starting the year as culturally responsive language teachers. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Lauren. What a wonderful session. We have so many great comments coming in from our participants. That was a great session on creating a classroom community where everyone's cultural assets are celebrated and valued. So we love that webinar. Thank you so much.